The Amazing Digital Circus takes everything away from its characters, their bodies, their names, their minds, and their freedom. And yet, despite all of that, they learn how to be human again. Stay and learn how broken people found meaning in a world that is meant to be a prison. When the pilot aired, it was easy to imagine a story about fighting an evil AI and trying to find an exit. Instead, the show does something unexpected. As early as episode 2, nobody is looking for an escape anymore. Even Pomni, the character who wants to get out the most, doesn't mention it again. And there's a paradox. People are trapped, but they're not fighting for escape, they are fighting to survive. It's a story about human connection forged in the darkest of places. Each character has their own unique way to cope, but only together can they reforge themselves and find new meaning in a world where meaning has been taken from them. At the beginning of the show, we are introduced to its world through Pomni, who is the newest member of the cast. Pomni's reactions are not unique. People react to becoming trapped in the circus the same way. Scared, disoriented, and on the verge of breaking down. Losing everything about yourself in just a single moment is terrifying. The circus takes away all your support systems, transforming you against your will into something that fits its cartoony environment. Think of it that way. You're looking into the mirror, but you are seeing a stranger who moves like you, talks with your voice, but has someone else's face, has someone else's name, and you are forced to live in that stranger's skin. It is you to some extent, but it really isn't. And now you must figure out who that stranger is. When Pomni finds the mirror in episode 1, the realization that this is how she looks right now is enough to make her pause, even though she's in the middle of running away from a monster and trying to save Regatha. The characters go through one of the most horrific displays of body alterations that you can imagine. Even though there is no physical pain involved, there is also no adaptation period. There is just an instant change that you must live with. And that's just Pomni, who is the most humanoid. Gengal is basically a ribbon with a mask. Kenya has no legs. Zubul is literally made of detachable parts. Some of the characters don't even have mouth and they still can talk and eat somehow. Imagine being hit with this and then suddenly realizing that you don't even remember your name. A name is one of the key factors in building identity as humans. It is pretty symbolic that in this new world, even though you get to keep your memories of who you were before, the key characteristics of your personality, your name and your identity, need to be reimagined. Right after Pomni arrives at the circus, she seems terrified after not being able to remember. This scares her no less than being transported into a virtual reality. She clings to the chance to get a new name because it will grant her at least some ground to stand on. Then there is the question of losing your physiological needs. Sleep being one of the most important one of our needs because it gives us a break from existence. It is one of the most important criteria for our mental health as well. The characters don't need sleep, but they want to dream. In episode 2, Pomni has a dream about abstracting. She doesn't need to sleep, but that's something she wants to do. We tend to underestimate the power of routine, but there are certain rituals and habits that we have acquired over the years that keep us grounded in reality. Having a work schedule, sleep schedule, taking time to eat food, meet with people, anything that keeps us in reality. In the circus, there is no routine beyond what Kane can conjure for the cast. The circus members willingly participate in the adventures to get at least some form of normalcy. Regatha says it herself in episode 1. Adventures keep them stimulated and distract them from horror of their existence. And lastly, one of the most gruesome things that people are forced to experience in the circus is isolation. Horrible isolation. Even though there are 6 people plus Kane and Bubble, that is still a horrifically small number. Kenya has been isolated for years and arguably suffered the most out of anybody in the circus. we can see how truly damaged he is in the way he is completely detached from reality and remains barely lucid most of the time. As you can see, there are numerous ways in which being trapped in the circus just strips you of your humanity, and there is no doubt that even the last resort, the escape of death, that for better or worse we all have in real life, is unavailable to these people. They can't even stop existing, strictly speaking, besides abstracting, but they don't quite view abstraction as that. At least it wasn't implied to be peaceful in the first half of the series. This whole situation is horrific from a psychological and existential point of view. It would probably feel like being crushed into a million pieces and forced to put yourself together again. But these people don't have a choice. They continue putting themselves together from broken parts. Some avoid reality altogether. Others choose to harm people around them to not feel pain themselves. When presented with horrific circumstances, everyone has their own survival strategies. Defense mechanisms are used to decrease the levels of stress. Each cast member has their own coping mechanisms. Some deny reality, some destroy it, and some, against all odds, adapt. There has been a lot of talking about how Jax is coping by detaching himself from reality and seeing everything as a performance, where he plays the part of the comedic relief. Humor is one of the most widespread ways to cope with trauma, something I am doing myself, so I can very well relate to Jax in that department. Jax often overcompensates with humor to lower the emotional stakes. Basically, when everyone else is taking the situation seriously, Jax uses humor to avoid facing the severity of it. For example, he did that at the beginning of episode 8 when everyone else was sitting in dead silence after Kane's fake escape adventure. Jax also uses avoidance to dismiss negative thoughts unless forced by someone externally, just like the argument he had with Pomni at the end of episode 6. Jax detaches himself from his environment by transforming it into a performance. He sees the people around him as characters, thus dehumanizing them and reducing the impact of his decisions on their well-being. He even referred to the cast members as characters in episode 6, assigning each of them an archetype, not really caring if the other cast members agree with it or not. In short, Jax is stuck in a cycle where he continues to hurt others because he is deeply hurt himself, being stuck in this world. But because he sees other circus members as one-dimensional archetypes, not individuals, he continues acting out and causing pain. He severely bullies Gangle, not quite recognizing the damage he is doing. Since none of them can't really die, it shouldn't be a big deal, right? He also believes she likes it, which is again something Jax assumed without bothering to confirm it. Jax's behavior is deeply destructive, not only to himself, but people around who are trying to build emotional ties with him. We see him willingly cut ties or refuse getting closer with many of the cast members, such as Regatha or Pomni. Jax causes the most harm to others with his way of coping, but there's another character who has caused most harm to himself, Kinga. Kinga survived by completely rejecting their reality, descending into the madness of his own mind. Similarly to Jax, Kinga detaches from reality. However, his coping is even more severe, as he is a completely different person most of the time when he is not in the dark. Kinga rejects his circumstances so severely that he is sort of split into two halves, the one that confronts the past pain such as losing his wife and being isolated, and the other that rejects it completely. When Kinga is not lucid, he doesn't remember his wife at all, and I would argue he has no memories of his life before the circus. And let's not forget the amount of trauma Kinga received because of his isolation. He has been alone for years. Prolonged isolation is considered one of the forms of torture, and Kinga was forced into it just after losing the closest person in his life. Kinga's psychological response is so severe that he is not himself anymore. He's not pretending to be someone else like Jax. He is a completely different person from who he was before entering the circus. Regatha is the opposite of Kinga or Jax. She does not reject the world around her, but deludes herself into seeing the situation better than it is and ignoring the negative aspects. This is toxic positivity. Regatha, partially due to her upbringing in an abusive household, suppressed difficult emotions to not inconvenience anyone. She denies her own pain and only allows positive thoughts to resurface. This approach has damaged her relationships with other characters in the long run. Regatha's positivity is problematic because it functions only to reject negative emotions. Someone who I would say is opposite of Regatha in that department is Gangle, because Gangle is at the mercy of her emotions and allows herself to be either happy or sad without constraining herself in any way. Then there is Zubul, who responds to this whole absurdity with apathy and refusal to participate in this new world, unless they are being forced. Zubul is using avoidance to keep to themselves, refusing to participate in adventures because adventures signify the reality of being trapped inside the circus, since they are quite literally the only thing to do in here. Zubul is too burnt out to offer anything to change the world around them because the world proves to be way too much. The last character, and the one who's the most successful in adapting, is Pomni. Her whole strategy is adaptation actually. Out of the cast, Pomni is one of the most resilient ones. She adapts to the world quite quickly, going from terrified of the adventures and rejecting them to embracing the possibilities the circus has to offer and actually enjoying some of them. Pomni makes the best of the situation, and she does it by connecting to the other people trapped in here. She demonstrates a lot of empathy and emotional maturity. With Gangle, she offers her support at the end of episode 4 without overstepping, since they didn't know each other that well yet. She empathizes with Kinga in the 3rd episode and quickly builds trust with him, finding out about him being lucid in the dark way quicker than people who have been stuck in here for years. I think Pomni is sort of a catalyst for them becoming closer to one another, because she pulls the cast members out of their own coping mechanisms and forces them to heal together. Of course, I don't want to give Pomni all the credit and say that she single-handedly pulled everybody out of their hiding and made them friends. Of course not. The connection was there, but it wasn't yet made into a group. Pomni made them a team. With her arrival, coping ended and true healing began. The show showed us how a group of very broken people could find meaning in a world that wasn't supposed to have one. Most of the screen time is devoted to displaying how they process their emotions, face trauma, pain, and grow from it. They are placed in a hostile environment, but get through it with trust in one another. It is pretty telling that most of the episodes have not the action or plot at their core, but relationships of the cast. In episode 6, we get lots of fun gun action, but ultimately it is so beloved by the fans because we got to see the bonds between Regatha and Kinga, Zubul and Gangle, and even Pomni and Jax. How each person has their own turmoil and how they get through it with the support of the others. Again, save for Jax. It isn't an action adventure. I think it would have been very easy for them to go with the route of essentially trying to escape the Matrix, but that's not the story Gooseworks was trying to tell. And I think that's for the better. There are very few stories where people are forced to be confronted with an inescapable situation and adapt to it. Usually the main heroes find a way to fight the evil guy and save the day. And very, very rarely do we see a world where there is no bad guy to defeat, or maybe the solution to the problem is just unreachable. So instead of fighting their way to victory, they are fighting their way to acceptance and adaptation. The core idea of the show, for me, is accepting yourself no matter what the circumstances of your existence are at the moment, and learning to connect with others who are just as disoriented and afraid as you are. It is constantly reinforced in the story that you cannot survive alone and you need others. Characters who reject connection, for example Jax, are constantly suffering due to their isolation. Zubul was cornered by Kane and just refusing to spend time with other characters on their adventures or becoming closer to them. It is only when they started going on adventures that their bond with Gangle started forming as well. At the same time, the show doesn't shy away from showing that human emotions and relationships are messy. It isn't enough to just decide, oh yes, I want to connect to people, to form those connections, because we are all afraid and a little bit weird in our own very special ways. We have our positive and negative traits, and very often those negative traits prevent us from being who we are, such as Regatha being scared to show who she was behind the positivity. It is a story that tells us that despite the world being flawed and terrifying at times, it can also be beautiful, fun, adventurous and exciting. And even though there are hardships and fear, you can go through it if you are brave enough to trust other people to see who you are beneath your exterior. Despite the characters being walking chess pieces, talking dolls or purple bunnies, all of them are capable of being sincere and transcending what this place has tried to make them, one-dimensional characters. They are people, and they can only become humans once they admit it to themselves. The Amazing Digital Circus takes everything away from its prisoners, their bodies, their names, their minds, and their freedom, but they still have each other, and as long as they have this connection, they stay human. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and please write in the comments if you agree with my analysis of the themes of humanity and healing. And as always, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe and support my channel. Okay, love you, bye bye.